Hey everybody, Michael Snyder here, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is May 8th, and right now we're looking at the infrared satellite imagery, and you can see that low pressure system moving in towards Northern California, Southern Oregon as we speak. Kind of in a troughy pattern here for the next couple of days before we start our warm up, and that's what everybody wants to know about is how much are we going to warm up? How long is it going to last? We also could have a few surprises with that warm up as well. Some monsoon moisture looks like it's going to crawl out of the desert Southwest towards the Pacific Northwest later in the period. We'll take a look at some of those details here in a moment. This is looking at SeaTac yesterday, 62 degrees, no precipitation, again below average 65, which is normal for this time of year, but just hold on for a few more days because we are going to get really warm here and we're going to challenge and probably be breaking some record highs as we go through the mid portion of May here coming up. The first 90-degree day ever for May at SeaTac is May 17th, and we have a chance to break that here on either probably the 14th, 15th, or 16th. We'll take a look at that in some detail here in a moment. This is National Weather Service Spokane, and you can see there is a risk for thunderstorms today, and this is going to include portions of western Washington, which I'll show you here in a moment. But look at some of these high temperatures as we go through the mid and later portions of the week coming up. Look at Lewiston, Moses Lake, 92 degrees. So we're going to warm up quite nicely for portions of the Pacific Northwest and really warm up here west of the Cascades especially, and I'll show you why here in a moment. This is looking at the upper elevation snowfall here across southwest Oregon down into Northern California. Maybe a dusting for the Siskiyou Summit, like at Crater Lake, 4 to 6 inches there with this upper level low moving across the area. So just a heads up for that. And then we're going to really change things up and warm it up across the entire Pacific Northwest coming up here. Here's today's thunderstorm threat, and you can see it does include the Seattle metro there and kind of clipping portions of western Oregon also. This is for tomorrow as that low pressure system will move up and northeast across the region here. Then the threat will mainly be Cascades east for tomorrow. Here we're looking at the high resolution rapid refresh, and you see the spin in the atmosphere and that precipitation across Oregon, moving up across the Washington Cascades, and even trying to get into western Washington as you go through the evening tonight. So heads up for that, eyes on the sky. Take a look at that low pressure system spin across Idaho, and you can see it really destabilize east of the Cascades as we go again through tomorrow with that thunderstorm threat. Now this is looking at the bigger picture here. We're looking at Alaska, North America, and you can see the trough off the coast of west coast of North America there as well, keeping us in that trophy position coming up here. System hangs out for a bit, but then a really deep trough sets up over the Gulf of Alaska, and it looks like it's going to retrograde enough to build this monster ridge across Pacific Northwest. Look at that thing over British Columbia there. Very favorable for some extreme temperatures here across the Pacific Northwest, and more on those temperatures here in a moment. But then there's going to be kind of a monsoon flow that tries to get up over the Pacific Northwest as well, even here in May. So now looking at the GFS, let's see if it agrees with the European. Here we go. This is about Friday morning shown here. Look at that trough out over the Gulf of Alaska. The ridge is starting its development here. We go on in through Saturday, Sunday. Look at that ridge position, just keeping all weather systems away, except maybe for some monsoon moisture again, but we're probably going to warm up pretty well. The only fly in the ointment with some of these temperatures here, though, is some of those clouds from that monsoon moisture could wreak havoc with some of our forecasting on those high temperatures. Now, looking at precipitable water, this is the same map again here of North America. You can see that trough digging, and look what's happening across the desert southwest down there. Look at Arizona. You can see that red rolling in there. The monsoon season starting early, creeping all the way up across Nevada, Oregon, and potentially into Washington by the time we get in towards the early portion of next week here. So this is 7 days out, and these setups can be really fickle, so this is just something to watch at this point. This is looking at mean sea level pressure. And again, I've been showing this the last few days here. This is looking at a visual representation of that thermal trough. So what happens is we get this big ridge of high pressure over British Columbia and some of the interior there, and that starts to flow offshore. And as it does, it brings some compression winds off the Cascades, and that brings that thermal trough up the coastline here, which is the signature for all the Pacific Northwest, West Coast heat waves. And you can clearly see it there by Sunday evening. That thermal trough is in place Sunday, likely to be an extremely warm day, probably approaching 90 for Seattle and Portland. This is looking at the GFS, 925 millibars, about 2,500 feet. So I'm going to speed ahead here. Look at that big trough out of the Pacific Ocean. Doesn't quite make it in. And then we start to back it up, and you can see the offshore wind come across western Washington, western Oregon. Look at that easterly flow that's going to really warm things up. And in these situations, Seattle and Portland can be warmer than Spokane and Boise, for example. This is looking at Seattle-Tacoma. Look at that. The GFS ensemble. That would be about on the 14th. A 90-degree day is not out of the question as we go through the 14th and 15th. So Interesting weather coming up here. This is looking at the national blend of models, shows mid and upper 60s potentially as we go on and through this weekend. But you're going to notice that warm up really starting here Thursday, Friday, and Saturday also. This is the European. So I zoomed in a bit here. You can see the control in blue is calling for a 90-degree day on Monday and potentially get into the upper 80s on Sunday here. So if you look at those individual ensemble members there as well, you see pretty good agreement that we're headed for some mid and upper 80s coming here, folks. This is looking at Spokane, and notice we don't get quite as warm for Spokane as we go on in through next week. That's because they're not getting that compressional heating. These thermal troughs will favor Seattle and Portland for the warmest temperatures. This is looking at Boise. Check it out, not quite as warm there, topping out maybe into the mid 80s there as we go through the early portion of next week. But the warm up is coming for the entire Pacific Northwest. So taking a look here, you can see that we've got very chilly temperatures around, and as we go on in through this week, you see that start to dissipate, and look at those temperatures really start to kick up here. And by the time we get in towards Saturday, look at that, a lot of the Pacific Northwest well above average. Look at Sunday here, you can clearly see that signal for some areas getting 20 plus degrees above average across the Pacific Northwest. Some pretty extreme temperature anomalies coming up here. So here goes the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. May 17th, look at that bullseye here along the west coast, highlighting our potential heat wave. This is 8 to 14 day, and I'm pointing this out because you see across the desert southwest, that is the monsoon kicking up early this year, and some of that could creep towards Pacific Northwest, something I'll be watching very closely here, one of my favorite weather phenomena here across Pacific Northwest. So anyway, yeah, we're looking at the infrared satellite one more time here, and the trough that's impacting the west coast here is probably going to kick off severe weather that I will be chasing here over the next few days. So this is probably going to keep me out here till at least Thursday, and I'll probably be back on Friday to resume my regular weather briefings there. But yeah, we're hoping for a little bit of a down day today. Then we're going to bounce back a little bit tomorrow, and Wednesday and Thursday look particularly active here for severe weather. So hopefully we're going to have some fun out here and maybe be back by Friday and enjoy that heat wave coming up, and maybe I'll be home for that monsoon moisture as well. So anyway, yeah, active weather ahead, big heat wave, monsoon moisture possible, thunderstorms today and tomorrow. And I'll be out here on the plains, and I'll try to put a few more things on my Twitter feed. We're seeing some interesting stuff out here. It's not leaving much time with all the driving there to post to social media though. But yeah, we have tornado threat probably coming up here, maybe Wednesday and Thursday, probably the most likely days here, and we're on search for a photogenic tornado out here across the Great Plains. So hopefully we can get that done this round, but if not, we will be back again out here across the Great Plains as we go through later in the month here and on in through June as well, probably. But anyway, hope you guys are having a good day. Click like, subscribe, and we will talk again tomorrow, and I'll see you guys then.